Hey guys, thank you for joining me for part 3 of my front axle rebuild. In this video we're going to be actually installing the differential carrier in the case and pretty much reassembly. So we got to set up the pinion preload. So we're going to actually be installing a crush sleeve eliminator kit with shims. So that's going to be kind of a trial and error, trying to figure out how much preload we need. Stay tuned and we'll see what we get into. So we're going to help with expansion just a bit. Just pull this right out of the freezer. So hopefully this will make it that'll make it easier on me. And we want to make sure we are bottomed out. So we are about ready to install this outer pinion race into the case. Before we do that, we need to install this oil retainer. And just like the name states, it retains oil, so the outer bearing will not run dry. Below the race seat, right below that, there's another smaller seat area where this will actually reside. We're going to apply a little bit of gear oil. And this is what it should look like. Okay, here we have our stock pinion gear that came out of the case. This is probably the original pinion gear. I don't know if you can notice, but it's both the drive and the coast sides are very smooth, super shiny. It's almost got a mirror-like finish. The edge is very sharp. Probably from improper pinion depth, or possibly from the material running through the gears. So here we have the new nitro gear, and the reason I went with the 29 spline is because they weren't offering a 27 anymore. I had to upgrade to a larger drive flange and a larger pinion nut, of course, with a larger inner diameter oil slinger. So what I'm going to do is actually utilize these old bearings, and we're going to actually make ourselves some setup bearings. So these will not go to waste. They'll be a perfect setup bearing for any future projects. So the first thing we got to do is we got to grind out the inside surface, because we want to be able to install and remove these at will. Okay, so we'll do that right about now. Okay guys, we're getting ready to start with our pinion gear assembly. We're going to reuse the old shim to get us within ballpark figure for our pinion depth. By adding shims, that'll actually set your pinion closer to the ring gear. Subtracting shim thicknesses, go with the thinner shim. That will actually set your pinion farther away from the ring gear. As a baseline. So the bearing now at will slides on and off. So here we have our crush sleeve eliminator spacer. That ends up replacing our consumable crush sleeve. One-time use. This is pretty much a hard part now. Now we can set the pinion preload by either adding or subtracting these tiny little shims here. Just like so. So we're going to measure these shims. $15. Don't think I want to go up that high. 30, 42. I want to start somewhere around 50. $52 is good. So we'll say $52 is our starting point. So the goal here is to achieve proper pinion preload. The FSM calls for anywhere between 8.7 and 14 inch-pounds of rotational force. At the same time, you have to be able to torque down the pinion nut down to 145 foot-pounds of torque. One cannot be without the other. You have to be able to reach both parameters in order to have a proper pinion preload. Went ahead and placed the dial indicator on the ring gear, and we're checking for backlash, and we are way off. So the ring gear has to be moved in this direction towards this bearing cap right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to back off this spanner nut here on my left and tighten one on the right. See where that leads. We're going to go completely loose. Install the dial indicator back on the case, and we are reading right about 7 thousandths of an inch, so we're right in the sweet spot, right in the middle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply the marking compound on the ring gear to check for proper gear contact. Okay, by applying a slight pressure on your ring gear, that'll actually force more pressure against the two gears. Alright guys, so we are looking good on our contact pattern. We are right where we want to be, right in the middle, center. We're not too close to the toe, which is the area closest to the actual ring gear body. We're not too close to the heel, which is the very outer edge. We're right in the center, actually dead on center. Not too far in or out. For our drive side, we are actually looking very, very good. Same contact pattern, right where we want to be. So after looking at the marking compound patterns on the ring gear, I decided that our pinion depth was actually set correctly. I decided to keep the original shim, the pinion depth shim, and went ahead and installed the brand new inner pinion bearing onto the pinion. So I'm going to go ahead and use this crush sleeve eliminator to help me with the remainder of the travel. So at this point, I decided to install the new outer pinion bearing into the case, as well as the new oil slinger. And we actually applied a little bit of black sealant from Toyota around the pinion seal as an extra measure, and decided to drive the brand new pinion seal home. And we are there. Alright guys, so we had to disassemble our pinion assembly from the case. We were rating way too much on our pinion preload. As far as the FSM goes, they call for anywhere between 8 and 14 inch-pounds of torque. Our last setting was down to 52 thousandths of an inch at our shim pack. We've increased it by 1,000. So hopefully that'll actually give us what we're looking for. It doesn't take much, you know, just by adding 1,000th of an inch will drastically change your overall preload. So let's go ahead and assemble this back in the case. So now we're going to go ahead and help seat the bearings. We're going to turn this clockwise a few times and counterclockwise. I have one of these inch-pound torsion type torque wrenches, so this helps measure rotational force. And we are on the money. All right, so we're measuring right around 10 to 11 inch-pounds of pinion preload. So we are ready to install our fork back into the case. As a reference, this is the bottom of the case. This is the top of the case. The teeth on your fork face towards the bottom. Okay. It's also this is a good tip for you. It's easier to pre-install your roll pin on the fork. This rod here goes into the case with the groove facing the top. This hole here is for your roll pin. On top of the case here, there's a small hole there where you're gonna push this bearing through. You're gonna drive this spring retainer into the same hole. That'll capture the spring. Plug. We'll put the plug back on your access port for your pin. So here's our dust cap, and we're going to apply a little bit of sealant around the perimeter. Alright, so we knocked off some of the rust off this indicator switch. It cleaned up pretty good. We're going to go ahead and reinstall this. And we're going to go ahead and just snug it up. We're actually going to install this larger spanner nut with the flat side facing out. And we're going to put that right around this fork. Coupler already pre-installed. Okay. Races are on there, so let's go ahead and drop this carrier in place. We're going to try to get it as close as possible. Okay guys, so we dropped it in. The coupler's in place. The coupler's mounted around the fork. Our larger spanner nut is where it needs to be. Okay, we're going to install our bearing cap. Slide these down. Start this spanner nut with a loose cap. Okay, the FSM calls for anywhere between 5 and 7 thousandths of an inch of backlash. So we're going to place our dial indicator on the drive side of our gear, and we're going to just rock the carrier back and forth. And we are right around 3 thousandths of an inch of backlash. So we got to loosen up this end. Just like that. We're going to loosen up the larger bearing cap. Okay, we're too tight on our backlash. We're going to back it down by 1 notch. Remember, keep your notch lined up with your key lock bolt hole. 5 thousandths of an inch. I don't have a problem with that, and we're gonna live with that. That is good to go. The FSM calls for anywhere between 5 and 7, and we are reading 5 thousandths of an inch of backlash compared to where we were at before, which was right on 11 and 12. That's pretty much cut in half. So we are good to go here. We're gonna apply a little bit of red thread locker on this, just a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and torque these down to 58 foot-pounds of torque. Alright guys, we're applying our marking compound to read our contact pattern. And what you want to do is you want to apply a little bit of resistance or pressure on your ring gear as you're turning your pinion. So now that we know we are good to go, these are torqued down to about 9 inch-pounds. Alright guys, so we are done with part 3 of my front axle rebuild. The differential is done. It was a pain in the butt. I don't do these two quite often, you know. I'll go years without doing an axle or differential rebuild. So it's almost you have to like relearn all the steps. And there's a lot of assembly in this assembly as you're going through setting these things up. So it takes a little bit of patience. But I'm happy with the way it came out. So the next step is to install this back in the truck. And man, I'm stoked. Thank you for joining me, guys. See you on the next one. Stay tuned for part 4.